Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for being here tonight. This is the beginning of a series that has been created to take your energy and kind of channel that in a common direction so that our community can continue to grow and develop and be the place that we all want it to be. This is really an important milestone, I think, in our community's history, and you are part of it tonight, and we're grateful for you for being here. My name is Lindy Wells. I work at Intrust Bank, but I have the privilege of serving on the board of the Wichita Community Foundation, and I'm a poor substitute for Brian Black, who's the chairman of the Wichita Community Foundation, who's traveling on business this week and is not able to be here, so that's why I'm here. The Wichita Community Foundation has a number of funds within that the foundation is responsible for managing, including one from the Knight Foundation. And our community's history with the Knight Corporation and the Knight Foundation dates back a long way. And we have been privileged to be one of the 26 cities that the Knight Foundation takes special interest in. And the fund that we have here is one of the funders of this speaker series that you will hear more about as we get through the evening tonight. The other two funders are the Wichita Downtown Development Corporation and the Leadership Council of the Wichita Metro Chamber of Commerce. These three funding groups felt it was important for us to carry on this conversation and to begin to move in positive directions so that we can continue to develop our community. We have a lot of dignitaries here, most of you, and I would like to recognize our elected officials. I'm going to ask if you would raise your hand when I recognize your group. We're not going to introduce you individually, but we want to acknowledge that you're here, and we appreciate the enthusiasm with which you represent us. Is Mayor Brewer here? I didn't see him come in. We have members of the City Council. Here's Janet Miller and Jeff Longwell. Can't see very well. County officials, I know Commissioner Norton is here. Do we have others from the county? Thank you. We also have board members from the Wichita Community Foundation, from the Wichita Downtown Development Corporation, and from the board of directors of the chamber. So if you all, that may represent a whole bunch of you. So thank you for being here. The part of this that I'm least confident in is to tell you now about the social media posts that are going on tonight. If you happen to be following on Twitter, please use the hashtag FuelTheFireICT, and you can follow Wichita CF, Wichita Community Foundation, Downtown Wichita, and Venture Boldly on both Facebook and Twitter. So I think I got through that okay. I'm not sure what I said, but thank you for doing that. I mentioned the long history that Knight Foundation has had with our community, and I'm not going to go into a lot of that detail, but as you know, the Wichita Eagle was a Knight Foundation, or a Knight Corporation newspaper, and the foundation really has taken a great interest in this community, and as a result of that, we have a guest tonight that comes from the Knight Foundation, Carol Coletta. Carol was a director of Art Place. She has a very unique interest in public-private collaborations and creative placemaking, which, again, I'm sure you'll hear about tonight. For 7 years, Carol was the CEO of CEOs for Cities, which was a national network of urban leaders, and it's in that role that we had the privilege of hearing Carol a number of years ago come here and help us kind of get jump-started our downtown development plan, as she had lots of counsel and advice about how we might be able to get off the mark as it comes to re-energizing our downtown. She's been named a Knight Fellow in Community Building at the University of Miami. She's a graduate of the University of Memphis and has completed graduate work at the University of Houston Clear Lake and in design at the Institute of Design in Chicago. I know we're excited to hear what Carol has to say, so you've heard enough from me. Please welcome Carol Coletta.
Hi, thank you so much. You know, every week, it seems like someone somewhere unveils the next new thing in urban economic regeneration. Last month, or maybe a couple of months ago now, you may have read about innovation districts, right? They were going to save all of our cities. Before that, it was green jobs. Before that, it was an announcement of the new Silicon Valley or Glen or Prairie or Bayou somewhere in the world. Before that, it was biotech clusters everywhere. Before that, it was convention centers and stadia. And before that, it was festival marketplaces. That tells you how long I've been around. This is nothing new. When I started in this business, my first job was to promote, get this is a true story, a downtown theme park. It was not as bad as it sounds now, but at any rate. But my second job was running a main street that had been converted to America's longest pedestrian mall. Now, if you're old enough to remember this, you know how badly that turned out. But I remember when those seemed like really good ideas. So when someone, including me, comes to town promoting the latest wisdom on urban economic competitiveness, I want to tell you, listen with great skepticism. Caution. Okay, so now that I've outed myself, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to impart my wisdom, but be skeptical. And, you know, I think there are some great truths about what makes cities competitive. But all cities are different, and all cities are at a different moment in time. That's why when someone tells you something is a best practice, dismiss them immediately, because we don't know what the best practices are, because the world is moving too fast, and your city is different. It is at a different moment in time. Nonetheless, I do believe there are some fundamental economic truths, and that we can, as city lovers, as people who want to build our cities, I think we can learn and should learn from those things. And that's what I want to talk to you about for the next few minutes. Look, I love the theme of this series, Fuel the Fire, and I think this is exactly the right moment for cities to be fueling the fire, because cities are gaining momentum all across America. Now, again, I would tell you, you know, when I started in this business 100 years ago, the notion that a downtown was going to redevelop, I mean, I swear you had to be like Pollyanna. You know, you had to be like, you know, Annie, the sun will come out tomorrow. Because it was it seemed like such an impossible situation. I was working, and just to give you perspective, I was working in Memphis, Tennessee, mid-sized city, not at that time predominantly African-American, but certainly on its way to being predominantly African-American, which meant, unfortunately, in America, also probably poor and undereducated. That's a terrible combination, and yet it persists, and it's too true today in America, this many years later. But Dr. King had been assassinated in downtown Memphis in 1968, and I was working on the redevelopment of downtown Memphis, you know, less than 10 years after that, actually much less than 10 years after that, but nonetheless, we won't go there. But you know, like imagine, okay, so this place, right? And I know there's a generation in Wichita, there's a generation everywhere, my generation, that still believes that downtown, you know, is like this impossible thing, right, to regenerate. Oh my gosh, no one will go there. Oh, it's unsafe. Well, I mean, okay, that's very outdated now. In mid-70s, not so outdated. And so, you know, I feel like I've been sort of running, you know, like sort of swimming against the tide all these years. But it's really interesting where we've now come. And so this is an unusual opportunity-filled moment for Wichita and for all major American cities. And so those of you here who are really working at this moment to get it right. I appreciate what you're doing, because I can tell you, you look at the economy in America, America does not succeed unless its cities succeed. So the work you're doing is critical not only to Wichita, but it's critical to the health and the success of our nation. So I've been thinking about what I wanted to talk to you about. And I think I want to work with you as you start this Fuel the Fire series to sort through some, I think, things that really matter to the success of cities. And I'm going to put them in 3 boxes, okay? So there are 3 categories of things. I think there are a few things that we know about what underpins the success of cities that are, I would call them, clear and enduring, right? These are things we're really pretty clear about. The research is very solid. Then I think there are some things that for which there is new and strengthening evidence. That's the second box. And then the third box is a little more intuitive. I would call these things emerging, or sort of glimpses of an unevenly distributed future. And so I want to take a shot at sorting these things out for you and for me, because I'm doing a lot of thinking about it at night, and sort of which is which. Okay, so as I look at all the factors that can that influence the success of cities, I think there are 2 that just leap to the top of the list, and there's really should be no argument about those 2. And they are talent and opportunity. Those 2 rise to the top of the priority list. They're clear and enduring. The term talent is really imperfect, because I'm using it as shorthand for people with at least a 4-year college degree. Now, bear with me, because no, those are not the only talented people, but these are the only talented people we can count, right? We can count people with a 4-year degree. And if you can count more of them in your community, that's a really good thing. In fact, if you had to want one thing for your community, that's the thing you would want. More people with 4-year degrees. Because it turns out that the success of your community, if you measure success as per capita income, 58% of the success of your community can be explained by the percentage of college graduates in your population. That's pretty impressive, right? If anything explains 58% of your success, it ought to be a priority, right? It ought to be at the top of the list. And I think more and more cities are getting this, and yet still there's this resistance to it. And I'm gonna talk about that. But the research is so clear on this that you know, if I would say, again, if you're not making the development, attraction, and retention of talent your #1 economic development priority, I would say you need to rethink your priorities, right? You need to rethink your priorities, because it explains so much. And it's interesting, because I think that's what this means is that everybody, every single person in your community ought to have a chance to reach his or her full potential. And and this is interesting. Education, we think of education in America as an individual good, a private good. If I get a 4-year degree, that's good for me. You know what? It turns out it's good for you too. If you live in the community with me and I get a 4-year degree, if you have less education, you still do better. All of us do better when we live near people who have more education. So it's actually a public good in a lot of ways. But right alongside the consideration of talent as a priority, we also have to create opportunity. Foundation for creating opportunity is education. So it's hard to go wrong investing in education. But as any educator knows, that's not enough. What's interesting is there's new research that's pointing us to something that I think we have paid very little attention to in the past. And I'm very excited about it. We're excited about it at night. And that is the finding that intergenerational economic mobility, in other words, if you start one place and you end up, moving up economically, there are kind of three big factors that influence this. One is, do you come from a two-parent household? Okay, we kind of got that. B, did you go to a good elementary school? Okay, we kind of know that. Here's the third thing that I think we didn't pay much attention to at all. Do you live in an economically integrated community? In other words, do you live in a community where people with more money and less money, which usually means, by the way, more education and less education, live in close proximity? That is actually a fundamental factor to intergenerational economic mobility, or what I would call opportunity. I don't know about you, but if where you're born dictates where you end up, if zip code is destiny, then I think the American dream is dead. And unfortunately, if you look at maps of this country, our major cities, as I've been doing the last year, in fact, we've been looking at 40 years of history of neighborhood change. What you find is that we're kind of going in the opposite direction, right? And we've got lots of policies that send us in a direction of getting people with more money and people with less money living not in close proximity, but farther apart. I think this is really key to how we think about building our cities. And I would really challenge you on this, Wichita, because this is not it's not top of mind yet, but if you make it top of mind, I think you gain competitive advantage. So I want to put that out there. Now, some people hear these notions of growing more talent and more opportunity as conflicting goals. You see this all the time in the major media. But again, I will just point out again, people with less education do better when they live in close proximity to people with more education. Again, no matter who you are, you're better off if you live near people with more education. So I think these two things that I'm calling clear and enduring evidence that these are factors that matter. Research is clear. They're intertwined. They support each other, talent and opportunities. So we need to be thinking about both of those things. So here's what we know. Talent, or the percentage of people in your population with a 4-year degree, is the best predictor of communities' economic success. 2, we know talent is mobile, and young talent, 25 to 34-year-olds with college degrees, are the most mobile people in our society. People with less education do better economically when they live near people with more education. Economic mobility is harder to achieve today, and it's harder still if you live in concentrated poverty. So, again, if you want to point to the two factors that matter the most to the success of cities, more than all others, I think the research points clearly to talent and opportunity. Now, this is not a trivial pursuit. In fact, when you compare Wichita to the largest 51 metro areas in the U.S., the city underperforms on some talent metrics that are forward-leaning, that point to the future. Your 25 to 34-year-olds with college degrees is a little low. The percentage of millennials in your population is a little low. And the percentage of foreign-born citizens with 4-year degrees is a little low compared to the other 51 metros. So I think that's an area of challenge for Wichita that you need to be aware of. Tell me, even though it's a little hard for me to see, how many of you in the room are working on the development, attraction, or retention of talent? How many? Bravo. Okay, those are the people doing the economic development work in Wichita. Thank you for what you're doing. Keep doing it. Redouble your efforts. Okay. Then I said there was a second category of things that matter to the success of cities, where there's new and strengthening evidence that this really matters. And I think you won't, there's one factor in my mind that fits in this box, and you're not going to be surprised what it is. It's place. Why place? Because place ought to be an accelerator of both talent and opportunity. Our communities need talent. The gettable talent is young because that's when people move. They move a lot more when they're 25 than when they're 35. And what are the kinds of places that help us get and keep talent? Again, evidence is mounting. It's really pretty clear. Those places that are attracting and keeping talent are places with vibrant core cities. So I'm going to ask again, who's working on Wichita's downtown? Investing in it, working on it, good. Okay, I'm talking to you. And I'm about to give you, I think, the most powerful arguments we have about why vibrant core cities matter. Over the past 4 decades, 40 years, there's been this steady increase in the relative preference of 25 to 34-year-olds for close-in neighborhoods. That means the CBD, the Central Business District, which is the downtown, and the 3-mile radius surrounding the downtown. So the downtown and the core neighborhoods. In fact, if you look at it, college-educated people today are more than twice as college-educated 25 to 34-year-olds are more than twice as likely as other Americans to live within that 3-mile radius of the core. And again, so this is not like, you know, some of you have heard me say this before. This is not like a blip on the screen. It's not an anecdote that USA Today reports and then it's gone away. This is a 40-year trend that keeps accelerating. 2/3 of college-educated 25 to 34-year-olds say first they choose the place they want to live, then they look for a job. 85% of millennials say they prefer urban living, and the numbers prove that they're acting on their stated preference. And now, this is interesting, jobs are following them. I just got to look at a study, it's not yet published, but it's a study on recent trends in business locations, and it's clear that business is now following talent back to the city. We thought that was happening for a long time. I mean, you could see evidence and, again, anecdotes of it, but now it's really clear. Since the recession, all of the, if you look at the major metro areas, all of the new jobs have been created in America's core cities. That's a complete reversal from what was happening prior to the recession. And I think what's happening is talent moved to core cities and now jobs are following, just like the reverse happened in an earlier time. It's also true that since the recession, housing prices in America's most walkable neighborhoods, the ones that have high walk scores and have more daily destinations nearby, have recovered far more quickly than housing in neighborhoods where you have to drive to get everything. Now, again, I want to point out, what I just said is not about what architects and planners and new urbanists and Lori Volk and people like that do. No. This is the average American home buyer. Who would have thought? Is now paying a premium. And where transit is strong, they're paying an even bigger premium for walkable neighborhoods. Where do you find walkable neighborhoods with lots of destinations near home? You find them generally in the core city. So there's a pattern here. Something's happening all over America in its major cities. Now, I can hear some of you thinking, yes, but Wichita is different, right? We don't need a strong downtown. We like our suburbs. I like suburbs too. Actually, the problem is every good city has good suburbs. I mean, every city has good suburbs, but every city doesn't have a great core. And I think that's become a real differentiator, particularly with a younger generation. Okay, I'm going to say something a little bit harsh, maybe. It's not harsh, but it's direct. I'm so Southern, it sounds harsh to me. But look, you know, the non-believers on this core city stuff can just, you know, can keep things from happening, right? They can say, don't invest in your city. Don't invest in the infrastructure. My gosh, don't invest in downtown. Nobody will go downtown. That's fine, and here's what's going to happen. You're just going to get farther and farther behind all your competitors. So you can make the choice. You can be deniers, okay? You can have, and you know, I'm sure the people in this room are not the deniers, but you need to be really straight with people, because this is not, again, these trends are consumer trends. They're demographics. They're going to happen. It's very predictable, and you need to get on board. So, okay, so that's my harshness. Okay, now I'm going to go back to why. Okay, so to compete for talent, but it ought to be obvious, right? To compete for talent, you have to offer the kind of lifestyle choice that people, you know, that young people in particular are showing a strong preference for today. And that's mixed use, mixed income, walkable, bikeable, transit-served neighborhoods with lots of street life. Good places attract and keep good talent, which is job one in terms of economic development, and good places also play a critical role in the economic mobility that is at the heart of the American dream, and I talked about why that is. Finally, there's a third category of factors emerging that I believe tell us something about what may be important to the success of cities going forward. The evidence, I think, is insufficient to date. I don't expect these factors ever to become more important than talent and opportunity in place, but they are on my radar, and I think they should be on yours as well. I'm calling these localness and loyalty. Here's why they made my list. When I led CEOs for Cities, we did a series of reports called Things Look Different Here. It was all about difference, the special qualities of one place that make that place different from all other places. And if you know Michael Porter's work on competitive advantage, you know that difference, in this case we call it distinctiveness, is one of three generic ways, strategies for, you know, competing. The others are low cost and focus. Really hard for a U.S. city to compete on low cost today in a global economy, and focus brings its own set of problems. So, you know, and the good thing is cities have distinctiveness or difference built in if you recognize it. But typically, and again, this goes back to my rant about best practices sometimes, or, you know, innovation districts and biotech and then so forth and so on. Most cities run away from their difference. They don't understand their difference. They don't look at their difference. And if they know their difference, they run away from it, right? Because the other guy's not doing it. The other city's not doing it. So, oh my gosh, I don't want to take that risk and do it and look wrong. But difference is something you really need to understand deeply and lean into it. And there are really easy ways to understand your difference. And I would urge you to understand it. This is one of the reasons I am so excited about this new generation that sort of rejects that sameness and is creating really bespoke cities. How many of you, this is my last, how many of you are under 35? Okay, pretty good showing. All right, bring your friends to the next one. And all the rest of us, make sure they bring their friends to the next one. Because, you know, I think this is the generation that we're really counting on. They're starting the interesting businesses, and they're slowly bringing, I think, the rest of the world along for the ride. I was looking at last month's Travel and Leisure, and they had a profile of Seattle's renewed Pioneer Square and some of its independent businesses with names like Rain Shadow Meets Squared. I just kind of love that. Rain Shadow Meets Square. And London Plain. And together they were billed, by the way, as a micro neighborhood, right? You don't want a neighborhood anymore, you want a micro neighborhood because that's distinctive. Also, a little profile of Athens, Georgia, with 5 and 10, and Agora Vintage, and Jittery Joe's, and Independent Baking Company. I mean, it seems like every city, every neighborhood now has its own donut and its own beer. And, you know, I think that's kind of cool because as brand exhaustion sets in, I mean, like, really, how many gaps does the world really need? You know, I believe the city that puts its distinctiveness on display has a deep understanding of its differences and can spin economic vibrancy out of that difference will have a real advantage. So I think localness is something we all need to have on our radar screens and just lean into localness. The other is loyalty. And this is the one, this for me is a real conundrum. It's probably because, you know, I've been gone from my home city for more than 10 years now, and I think I'm still conflicted about it. I think of loyalty as engagement on steroids. Are people passionate about their city? Will that passion turn into action on behalf of their city? And for the most mobile citizens, will they maintain some fractional loyalty to your city? Okay, so basketball fans here read the news about LeBron James leaving Miami, returning to Akron, home, where his home is. And that's still, I think, resonating with basketball fans everywhere. And here's how I explained it to Sports Illustrated. I know many of you read this, but I just want to quote from it. This is not about the roster or the organization, he wrote. I feel my calling here goes above basketball. I have a responsibility to lead in more ways than one, and I take that very seriously. My presence can make a difference in Miami, but I think it can mean more where I'm from. Our community, which has struggled so much, needs all the talent it can get. What was interesting is LeBron, you know, maintained his loyalty to his hometown of Akron, even when he moved to Miami. And when he quit Miami, he reassured the disappointed, Miami will always be my second home. And there are a lot of people for whom your city, you know, is home. Even if they live elsewhere, it's home. And I think we should all be taking a cue from Australia, and I won't talk a lot about this, but there's a group in Australia called Advance Australia. And they're very determined that even as people leave Australia, they will maintain ties to Australia, and they're very organized about it. So I've been thinking about fractional loyalty. You may not be able to get all of a person's time or all of a person's tax dollars or all of a person's presence, but if you can get even a fraction of that, I think you should figure out ways to organize and get that. And ultimately, maybe you get more and more of that. You know, that's because, I mean, to me, it's back to how do we develop all of our talent and put all of our talent to work and recognize our talent even though it may be elsewhere. You know, there was a time, and it was not so long ago, when you could get 10 men, and it was men, in a room, and they could make almost any decision about a city's future. Today, good luck with that. The future of a city is not made by a few bold strokes by a few key people anymore. The future is the product of thousands of people making small decisions every day about what they believe about their future, the future, and their role in it. And I think that's why this thing we call community development is so dang tricky, because in so many ways it's the product of lots of decisions by lots of people. You don't change a community overnight, you know that. You change it one decision at a time. We were talking about the city trips and the fact that it, you know, all of a sudden something burst into the media as an overnight success, but that overnight success has been in the making for 20 years. That's the way cities get built. So, you know, I would challenge you as community leaders, and I'll stop here, to put everything, including the referendum that you're facing, I would put everything you're asked to support to 3 tests. Will this decision increase the supply of talent? Will this decision increase opportunity? And will this decision increase the quality of this place? As someone, and I said this earlier, who believes that the fate of our nation rests in the success of America's cities, I deeply appreciate the work that each of you in the room I know is doing, or you wouldn't be here for this series tonight. I hope you will come back, and I hope out of this series will coalesce a real sense of Wichita's future and what you need to do together to make that future happen. Thank you. So, thank you so much. I have been asked if I'll take some questions, and I'm happy to do that. We've got about 10 minutes. Anybody have a question? A challenge? A complaint? Yes?
Could you say a little more about fractional loyalty and how one might demonstrate that?
Yeah, you know, I think I'm absorbed with this question. I don't know what to do with it. I don't know completely what to do about the question of localness, and I would be really interested for anyone with an idea, for me or for Knight, on this. It would be, I would invite you to talk to me afterwards. Fractional loyalty to me, I still have my home in Memphis, and I'm still, actually, here's the deal. Here's the deal. I lived in Chicago for 10 years, so I'm a big NBA basketball fan, so I say on any given night, I'll probably win because I still follow the Grizzlies and the Bulls and the Heat. So, you know, my odds are very good. And to me, that's what fractional loyalty is all about. So am I willing? It always struck me as strange. I still pay, you know, I still own a home in Memphis. I still pay taxes in Memphis. I don't give back a lot because I'm on the road all the time. But it always struck me as strange that no one ever asked me to serve on a board, right? Or nobody ever asked me for a donation in Memphis. I mean, why not? I mean, that's where my heart really still is. And so it's like, well, if they're not asking me, who else are they not asking, right? That's what I would say. So I would figure out who are those people who have some piece of their heart still left in Wichita, who may not be present all the time, but you can get a little piece of their money or their time or their talent and put it to work. Particularly mid-sized cities, I think, have an issue with this, right? I mean, we don't have enough talent in our cities. We can use every bit of talent we can come by. And again, Australia does this very deliberately and very well. And I've never seen a U.S. city organized to do this. So that's what I mean by fractional loyalty. Yes?
As to your comments about increasing the number of four-year degrees, Wichita has in it and is surrounded by a very, very, very strong network of community colleges. Technical education here is absolutely vital to much of what we do. And I guess I would just like some reassurance that you're not telling us to ditch all that work and to focus on four-year degrees. And what would you say to us in terms of continuing our investment and our encouragement of higher education, period?
Well, and I'm not telling you to ditch pre-kindergarten education or elementary school or high school diplomas. All of that is on the trajectory to getting a four-year degree. The research, and this differs in local communities, but if you look nationally, unfortunately, there could be a lot of reasons for this, but two-year degree people don't do a lot better financially, per capita income. They don't do a lot better financially, on average, nationally, than high school graduates. And, I think that's not because they're not smart or smarter and have, more education. I actually think what's happening today, and you know this, a lot of employers are simply using four-year degrees as, that's a nice little way to say yes to some people and no to others. I mean, it's just a convenient way. So absolutely, depending on the market and depending on the technical education and how it's calibrated to the local market, I think you absolutely want to support technical education, just like you want to support everything else that comes before it. One of the things that I think our economy is requiring today, is flexibility. And the job market is changing so quickly that if you only have one skill and the need for that skill goes away, then then you're sort of stuck. And that is, I think that's where, none of us wants to get stuck, and all of us need to be flexible and ever more flexible and keep learning. I mean, the more we learn, the more valuable we are. So, yes, invest. Yes?
I have a quick question. You were talking about finding a difference in your community.
Yes.
And expanding on that.
Yes.
I
don't need that.
And I would like if you would just expand on that a little bit about what are the thought process we would go through to make some decisions on that, on how to change.
Yeah, that, well, and
let me say one thing.
Yes, please.
Wichita is known for its people, and people say we love living here. People who've moved here from other cities, they love living here because of the people. They don't really expand on anything else. Mm-hmm. And I know that people make it, but you want to have something that draws them there initially. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to be really frank because I get to leave town tomorrow at 6 a.m. Seriously, a lot of people sitting in a room like this in a lot of other cities would say, our people are our strength. So you're probably right, but it's not enough, right? That's not a difference. So that won't set you apart from any other city. Although there are some cities definitely friendlier than others. But let me talk about difference, because it's a really important point. Here, if I were going to analyze the difference and do it really quickly, and others of you probably have a lot of other ideas, but here's what I would do. I would first look at our industry classifications and our job classifications to see where we have difference from other communities, and particularly other communities that you find yourself competing with in the region. It's the first thing I would do. But I would also look at my patents, and then I would look at the classifications there. And the next thing I would do, and this is where I think a lot of people overlook a huge opportunity, I would look at consumer attitudes, behaviors, and beliefs and how those differ. And because you can develop both place attributes as well as economic attributes based on what consumers, how we're different. Because if a business, for instance, let me give you an example of Portland, Oregon. That's a city I know pretty well. Portlanders, turns out, drink more beer, drink more wine, read more books, and participate in outdoor sports much more than other people in America. So what that's made it possible for Portland to do is to respond with businesses that serve people who want to be physically fit, active outdoors, drink wine, drink beer, and read books. What happens is if you have a market of people who want to do those things, you start serving that market. They are a discerning market, right? So they're saying you're good, you're not so good. The people who are good keep developing their product, their service, and then they grow their market share beyond the local market. So the local market, because it's different, helps you develop a competitive advantage as a business that you can then use to serve others, which then creates more employment in your town and more money in your town. So I think it's not an aberration that Nike is headquartered in Portland, Oregon. Nike developed because people in Portland sort of went out, decided that going out and running around in the middle of the day and sweating was really a good thing to do before the rest of us figured that out. And as a result, Nike is in Portland. So I just think the difference is, and you can look, for instance, your television station is looking at Scarborough results all the time that say how people in your community are different. They may like to golf more. They may go to casinos. I don't know what they do. plant more flowers. Do we give you the Scarborough information for Wichita? So you've got it. Well, she's got it. Ask Shelley. She knows, because we did a metropolitan matrix which showed how Wichita is different. So I think that's a lot to build on. You need to share that widely so you can. Good. All right. So she's the lady. Go see her. Yes, and then here. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Yes.
Since you mentioned education is so important, and especially four-year degrees, so that means parents care so much about education for their kids. But we, like many cities, have everybody leaving to the suburbs because of the perception of the schools, and especially in the core area. And I'm not trying to put down the Wichita school system, but there's something that's wrong with, not the school system itself and their effort and their commitment and their capabilities, but something is moving everybody out to the suburbs to go to to send their kids to school. And that, I'm sure that's not an uncommon issue in many other cities. Little Rock,
Yep.
everybody,
Yep.
Tulsa.
Yep.
What's the answer in your opinion?
Well, okay, I would be paid much more if I knew the answer. But I will say, I think there are a couple of, I think there's one really important clue to the answer to this question, which is a very tough question. And yes, it happens everywhere. Well, let me make 2 points. First of all, if I were just really hard-nosed, I could say, well, 3/4 of households have no kids in school. So I'm just going to focus on the 3/4 I can serve and not worry about the schools. That's one answer. Second answer, though, is we took a look when I was at CEOs for Cities a few years ago. We did a study called Kids in Cities, and I just wanted to understand how pioneering urban parents were raising kids in cities, right? What were they doing? And they were concerned about 3 things: safety, space, and schools. Urban pioneering parents were solving for those things in these ways. Space, right? You could have less space, not the yard. They solved for that with public space, right? So they traded off private space for better public space, like parks, for instance. Safety, they relied on eyes on the street. So it was not about, they felt they could rely on the community to help keep their kids safe, and that was their fix. The third thing was, and this is important, they didn't need a great school system, they needed a great school. And there's a difference. And I think that's where magnets, charters, all kinds of things have been really meaningful in keeping urban parents in places even like Philadelphia, where the school system is, blowing up every year. And it will be interesting to see how that trend continues. So those are, that's a clue. It's not an answer. I do think that we all have to admit, when a system is serving a disproportionate number of poor children, which city systems typically are, then the system will be at a disadvantage. I think the challenge. Okay. So the challenge that I've run into is that many city educators, and God love them, they are so focused on equity that they cannot at the same time recognize that you need to keep taxpayers in the city paying into the system so that equity can be provided, or you have a better shot at equity. And so they're very reluctant to treat children in any way, or schools in any way, different. And so those are politically charged issues that have to be wrestled with.
You're asking to create community downtown, at least that's what it sounds like to me. So how do you create a community when you send your kids 5 miles away and you have no impact or connection to a school? I mean, you're just blowing up community all over the place.
Well, I'm saying I think there are 2 things. One solution is 3/4 of the households have no children in schools. I can serve those households really well in a downtown. The problem is when, particularly if you're looking at 25 to 34-year-olds, they marry later, they couple later, they marry later, they have children later, but eventually many of them do. So what happens then? Can you hold on to them? The great experiment right now going on, I think, is Philadelphia. Can you hold on to them? And again, you don't have to have a great system, you have to have good school choices. So, but I'm not, that's about the best I can do. You had a question. I think, yes. And then over here, you had a question.
An important part of what you talked about was the proximity of low income to high income.
Yep.
Could you, because I live about a mile from Charles Koch, and I'm not feeling the love there. So could you explain why that's important?
It's important. Let me refer you to, if you're really interested in this subject, there's a new piece of research, and that's what I was referencing, by Raj Chetty and his team out of Harvard, that I was actually surprised by this research finding that economic integration was so important to intergenerational economic mobility. But I think Marjorie Turner has also done some very interesting research for the Urban Land Institute, the Urban Institute. And Marjorie points out two things. One, if you have high income, low income, let's just make it simple, people living in close proximity, what happens is people with greater wealth create local economic opportunity, right? I mean, in a stupid, simple way, I want my coffee bar nearby, and that creates jobs for that people with less income can take, right? So there's that. But then the higher level opportunity, the second level opportunity that adds great value is if you can get people to, as she puts it, cross the street. Now, anyone who's lived in a condo building knows it's really hard to get people to cross the hall, much less cross the street, when people are unlike you. But I think that's something we're actually looking at Knight Foundation right now. We're interested in interesting experiments around getting people to cross the street. So again, that's something, if anybody's got any ideas, we're going to begin to try to do some testing. You had a question. Yep.
In other communities that you've worked with, has the change or movement been driven for the under 35 crowd by the over 35 crowd?
That's a great
by a majority,
question.
And in what ways have you worked to engage and listen to that younger demographic?
Yeah, that's a super question. I think what fails is when people of my generation try to recreate the organizations we're comfortable with and impose them on young people. Okay, so we're going to have the Young Leaders Council at the Chamber of Commerce, which is not a bad idea necessarily, but I think we cannot start with the idea that the way we organized our civic lives has any appeal to young people, because I think they're organizing their civic lives very differently. Without organizational structure, it's very episodic. Nobody's going to lunch every, a Rotary lunch at every Wednesday, right? I mean, they don't, it's like, I don't want that. We can connect in other ways. So I think the most successful things I've seen in other cities are when 25 to 34-year-olds do not wait for permission. They're just going out and doing their thing. And when there's someone, I see it in Milwaukee, I've seen this in a lot of cities, where there's someone in the power structure, the traditional power structure, that recognizes the value that they're bringing and sort of just has trust that they need to invest. So they can bring some resources to those very different ways of operating and allow them to emerge. And we're trying to do that at Knight. So, that's what I've seen. Did you have a question? No. Okay. Anyone else? Yes. Okay. Sorry. Hard to see. And then we're going to wrap up. So this is the last question.
You haven't yet addressed the importance of a vibrant arts and culture scene in cities. And I know some of the literature, so it's kind of an unfair question at the very end. But can you tell us something about the research that's out there about how critical it is to have that kind of vibrancy, which is so important to talent?
It is. I think that, again, I ran Art Place for a couple of years, did the startup there, and What I would say is that the research is not terribly clear on the specific value of arts and culture that art and culture is going to outperform some other things, right? But is it a critical part of the mix of what makes cities vibrant and appealing? Absolutely. But again, arts and culture that comes in a lot of different flavors. And so it depends on what you're trying to do with art and culture and what your goal is. But we believe very strongly at Art Place, and certainly still do at night, and we've made investments in our portfolio at night, which is supposed to be the community and national initiatives, not the arts portfolio. We've made investments in the arts because we believe that arts are such an important contributor to the vibrancy of communities. And if I had to sort of summarize what I think people are looking for, these people who are moving back to cities in great numbers today, I would say what they're looking for is, if I had to use one word, it would be vibrancy. And so all of the things that contribute to that, I think, are critical to the success of cities. Because again, I'm sorry, I'm going to say one more thing. Don't forget what I said. I think I didn't use the stat, but I'll use it now. 64%, I said 2/3, 64% of college-educated 25 to 34-year-olds say, most mobile people in America, say first they choose the city they want to live in. Then they look for a job. So if you're not competing on livability, on appeal, on vibrancy, you're not competing economically. So, okay, good, thanks.
You okay with the stairs? They're kind of wobbly. Okay. Thank you so much, Carol. I'm Shelley Pritchard. I'm the president and CEO of the Wichita Community Foundation, and we were thrilled to partner with the Chamber and the Leadership Council of the Chamber and Wichita Downtown Development to bring you Carol. I think she left a very great, vibrant start to this city, and I loved the idea of localness and loyalty. And when she said to understand and embrace our differences, and I think she's really helped us get the courage to start that tonight. So, and thanks to all of you. When we planned this, we had no idea if it'd be the staff and, Lindy sitting here. So we're thrilled that you guys came out. And thanks to Lindy, who is a great board member, and just to all of our board members and the supporters, and of course the staff who made this all possible. And I was tweeting. Our 23-year-old staff member taught me how to tweet, so I did understand what you were saying, Lindy. And isn't it fun to see our tweets live online? I did tell Carol that we were going to monitor it in case somebody asked for her phone number, and she said, that'd be fine. It's been a while, she said. So we won't tell her husband. No, we won't tell her husband, but if anybody wants to know it, just let me know afterwards. We would love to thank the Lux and Michael Ramsey and Dr. Esther. Obviously, this is a great space, and we wanted it to be motion and dust. If I picked up my purse earlier and had dust all over my black pants, because that's where Wichita is. We're really moving, and we're in a great state of progress. So thank you to Michael and Dr. Esther and Boca Development for letting us be here. And to Farha Construction. We kicked their guys out like an hour and a half before you got here. So it's working, and Farha really worked with us and let us get in here and set up and do this deal. And then Kent Audiovisual has been great. Our staff said, we want this and this and this, and they just made it happen, so it's been really wonderful. We did record the series, and I'm not sure exactly how that's all going to happen, but this will be available online eventually for you to see, as will the next two. So we'll see all of you back here on September 17th at 5 o'clock. We'll be hosting James Chung, who is a local guy. He went to Collegiate. He is a demographer, but is a demographer like I never imagined. He is so excited to talk about the changing demographics of the country, and specifically Wichita, because we're his hometown, and how we have to adapt our businesses to meet that changing demographic and what all that's going to mean. Same location, back here, but it's going to be a different setup. Every one of these is going to be different. And next time you come, Espresso to Go-Go will be open. So you can get some caffeine while you're here, so that'll be good. And in case you had on really dark sunglasses or have some kind of vision impairment, you didn't see the hashtag of Fuel the Fire ICT, continue to follow the conversation. Obviously, we had great response today, and we know that's going to continue through September 17th. And then our final series, which is on October 29th, and we'll be hosting Brad Siegel from the Denver area, who works specifically on urban revitalization and downtown development. So thanks to all of you for being here. Special thanks to the staff, and a great thanks to Carol and the Knight Foundation for really kicking off this series and getting us started in such a vibrant way. So if you'll exit out the construction doors, and the funding partners gathering is going to be upstairs on the 7th floor. So thank you so much for being here. Have a great evening.